I'm Hugo Disler from Farming Secrets. I've had the pleasure of being involved with farmers all my life from the age of 6, and as you can see I'm quite advanced, but non-stop listening to farmers, helping farmers, and exchanging information from experts back to farmers or from farmers back to other farmers. Now there's an interesting topic at the moment which is foot and mouth disease, and it affects grazing. But so what's happening is we're getting a lot of, villainisation of animals. We're having the pig industry attacked, we're having the poultry industry attacked, and now there's a threat of foot and mouth disease coming into Australia. But the interesting thing about the foot and mouth disease is this, that back in turn of the century, around 1900, in the early 1900s, Sir Albert Howard put together papers when he was working in India, and his first book, or his major book, was Farming and Gardening for Health or Disease. This book was put out about 1940, but it was compiled before that. And he's put out another book, one book, which is called, it's got two titles. It's got one title, but it comes in different formats. And it's called An Agricultural Testament. Now, in this book, he makes it clear that he was using compost to create good pastures. And what he made it clear was that when his cattle were rubbing noses with the cattle over the other side of the fence, and actually rubbing noses, and those cattle on the other side of the fence had foot and mouth disease, his cattle did not get foot and mouth disease. Now, the establishment would not want you to believe that. Why they don't want you to believe that, you can answer that for yourself. As I keep talking, I think you'll put the two and two together. And basically, I'll give you a hint. Big businesses rely on remedies. That's where the money is, in remedies. So if there's a problem and they've got remedies, that's where the money is. Now, I'll just go to one thing that we established quite early in the piece. If you give animals a big range of nutrients, like, I'll just jump a little bit. Well, as Fred Provenza, who's written this book here, Nourishment, What Animals Can Teach Us About Rediscovering Our Nutritional Wisdom. Notice we use the word wisdom. And what he said, animals require some 60 or so different nutrients from their grazing, bulletproof, or to be very, very healthy. And what we find here in Australia, that out in the outback country, Australia's has the biggest export of organic beef. Why the organic beef? It'll never get foot and mouth disease. The reindeer, the deer running wild animals won't get foot and mouth disease, even though they might have hoofs. What is very clear, that these animals in the outback of Australia, who are naturally organic, graze on a big range of plants, and they're natural plants. So they become so resistant to any problems that there's no way in the world that they'll get foot and mouth disease. Now, interestingly, and another thing what Fred said, Homo sapien is the most destructive species that has ever inhabited the earth. So we've got a lot of correction to do if we take that on for real. And I think you mightn't like hearing that, but that's the case. The other thing too is, back in the 80s, Pat Colby, she worked out that with farmers telling her what to do, or farmers what to do, she worked out a recipe that was based on 6 different products, which was dolomite, copper sulfate, yellow dusting sulfur, seaweed meal, rock salt, and sulfur. What she found was originally she had farmers mix it up in one thing and had the cattle, sheep, goats eat it. And what farmers found quite quickly, if they separated, the animals did a better job. From that point on, Pat really made it clear that those products should be separated so that the animal can choose whatever it wants. We did a lot of work with other farmers, and so we came up with quite a list of products that farmers had used in licks in in their own licks, when they created self-licks. And we did an even more exhaustive list of products that had been used. And then we filmed, we put on film these products, various contraptions that farmers have rigged up to put these various licks in. The idea there is, if you can't graze your animals on a huge range of vegetation, then the next best thing you can do is put out stock supplementation. And just looking at, we've got Pat Colby here filmed. We're quite proud that we were able to film her a long time ago. She's also written a book which is a Bible to a lot of people. It's still available, I believe. And we've got Fred Provenza on DVD talking about animal nutrition. Interestingly enough, that we filmed Tim Wright. What Tim Wright found that when he gives his sheep Himalayan salt, which is very complex, that they eat 30% less grass in the paddock. Plus they have much easier birthing and other advantages. So that's another thing what you can do. The more complex this feed you give the sheep or the cattle or whatever, and the more bulletproof you make them. Interestingly, we filmed Gabe Brown on 3 DVDs. Gabe said that he wants to get his pastures up to where the prairies are, and where there's 175 different varieties in the prairies. And that is the aim for the farmers, to get as many plants growing as they possibly can. I'll go back to Fred Provenza's. Fred said in his book, the Nourishment book, he said, most farmers, when they have improved pastures, have about 13 or so different seeds. He calls that a monoculture. He knows that is not what animals want. As I said before, animals in his studies require about 60 different nutrients, not to the 14 or so grasses that you have in paddocks. So the idea is you let your animals, or get as many different species growing in your paddocks as you possibly can. Get away from monoculture. Get away from synthetic fertilizer, because you want the soil functioning properly to feed the plants properly. Plus, you want as big a variety as possible. That includes herbage of any sort. You might have them in windbreaks. You might have them in hedgerows, or you might have scattered trees like willows, etc., in your paddocks. And don't think willows are bad. They have their purpose. So the whole idea is to be careful that you're not trusting big business and their board of directors who direct their lobbyists or direct their administrators to lobby governments and come up with all sorts of cliches and come up with things like animals are bad because they pass wind. So I'll just stop there. It's about diversity in thinking, diversity of plants, so the animals can be very healthy.
Hugo, can I just ask you, we used to sell seaweed, which I think Pat's got on her free choice supplements. Tell us why seaweed's so good.
Well, seaweed has been reputed to have every known nutrient that's on Earth to have gone into the sea. So whether you're feeding a fish meal, which you have to be careful of because it's an animal product, or you're feeding seaweed, which is actually not a weed, it's an algae that's collected a lot of nutrients out of the sea. It is a very comprehensive thing, and what Pat found and the farms have found, and we used to sell it by the tons, actually by the container loads. And what farms found that initially that the sheep or the cattle would hoe into it at a great rate, and they thought, well, we can't afford this. But after so many weeks or even a month, that they slowed up to not eating it. And what Pat Colby made it clear, The animals needed it. And when their system got to a point that it didn't need it, they slowed up eating it. And other farmers would, because they couldn't afford it, it was just costing them too much, would lace it with dolomite, just a certain percentage of dolomite, to slow them up on eating the seaweed. But that is, according to Pat, that was wrong. You let them eat as much seaweed as possible because they needed it. The animals know what they need. It's not like us humans. We tend to go for anything that tastes good.
And the other thing I'd add in there, Hugo, is that people found their soil started getting balanced because the animals were eating the minerals. And looking at soil tests before and after, their soil started balancing out.
Well, see, that's another furphy, which, again, I'd have to go into a lot of detail with, is that in the traditional soil testing, in which I do believe we should do soil testing, but a soil observation is better if you use the two together. And what farmers have found is that putting out a smidgen of these products in a lick, that their grasses were actually changing, and which actually indicated that they didn't need large quantities of fertiliser in the paddocks. And one extraordinary thing was that here in Australia, we sort of say in Australian soils are phosphate deficient. When farmers put out rock phosphate, except in the dairy industry where it was shown to be deficient, when farmers fed it out to sheep, cattle, I won't say any other animals, that they found that the rock phosphate was a product that was least eaten rather than the product that was most eaten. As I said before, in the seaweed, they will guts that seaweed because they're after a particular product. But one thing that was proven for me and for many other farmers, phosphate was not the missing product that the sheep wanted. That's much sooner hop into a basalt dust, which sounds ridiculous.
Well, Hugo, I think there's so much that's coming out of this that we should do a separate session on Pat's supplements and things, because it saves so many farmers with health problems and saving on feed if you're feeding out or anything like that in drought. So let's do another one on that and we'll share the details.
Well, this subject, we could talk about it for quite some time, and it's extremely important because it has the farmer be in a stronger position. So you don't have to listen to the cronies, the collaborators of big business. And as someone said, a leading consultant said, big business got the perfect model. Provide products that damage the soil, make animals sick because the plants are sick, and then they provide products to fix up all the problems. So it's a perfect business model, but it's actually the most insidious business model. And it's community and farmers that will break that, and they are doing it already. There's many farmers who are selling directly, and many people want to buy directly from the people because they want grass-fed. In fact, I just recently looked at the last paper that I was looked at, and there's a farmer advertising his stud bulls that are grass-fed, not the stud bulls that are fattened up and glossed up with all sorts of whatever it takes to gloss them up and make them look fat. No, these are grass-fed bulls. There's more to say. We will have a chat with you people. Take this very seriously. Learn who to trust and learn who to be sceptical of. And there is such a thing as anecdotal science. The cronies will tell you, oh, it's anecdotal. It's it's not scientifically proved. There is such a thing as anecdotal science. As Arden Anderson said, if you hurt your finger with a hammer, you don't need the science to prove that it works, that it hurts. Okay, so thank you very much for listening so far.